My beloved child. Stop for a moment, because there is a reason this story found its way into your hands at this exact moment. Imagine yourself standing alone in a quiet room late at night, the world outside almost completely still, when a thought you have been trying to ignore suddenly rises again. Something about this person doesn't feel right. Not hatred. Not panic. Just a small hesitation you cannot explain. In this fictional spiritual story, that hesitation becomes the beginning of a journey, one that asks a difficult question. What if your heart noticed something long before your mind was ready to admit it? You have probably experienced that strange moment when someone smiles at you, speaks kindly, tells you exactly what you want to hear, and yet something inside you remains unsettled. You tell yourself you are imagining things. You remind yourself that everyone deserves the benefit of the doubt. You wonder whether your past experiences have simply made you cautious. But then, hours later, their words return to you. A sentence. A look. A sudden change in their tone. Why did that tiny moment stay with you when everything else about the conversation seemed perfectly normal? In this story, you are not being asked to become suspicious of everyone around you. You are being invited to become honest with yourself. There is a difference between fear and discernment. Fear makes every shadow look dangerous. Discernment simply asks you to look again before handing someone the keys to places inside you that took years to rebuild. And somewhere in your life, there may be a person who has been standing closer to that locked door than you realized. But why have you allowed them so near? Picture the scene. You are sitting across from this person at a familiar table. Maybe it is a cafe you have visited together many times. Rain taps gently against the window. Cars pass through the wet street, their headlights stretching across the glass. They are talking about ordinary things, laughing at something that should not matter, and for a few seconds you almost forget the uneasy feeling. Then they say something about your future. Something that sounds supportive on the surface, but somehow makes your chest tighten. You look up. They notice. What? They ask. Nothing, you answer. But it isn't nothing. Because you suddenly realize they know more about your plans than you remember telling them. They know what you are afraid of. They know what opportunity you have been considering. They know which dream you secretly want to pursue. And instead of celebrating it, they casually explain why it probably will not work. Not cruelly. Not aggressively. Almost lovingly. That is what makes it difficult. They tell you they are only trying to protect you. They say they have seen people make mistakes. They remind you of everything that could go wrong. And because you trust them, you listen. But when you leave that table, you notice something strange. You feel smaller than you did when you arrived. Why would advice from someone who claims to care about you leave you feeling ashamed of believing in yourself? That question follows you home. You place your keys on the counter. You remove your jacket. The room is quiet, but their voice is still there in your thoughts. For the first time, you replay the conversation without defending them. You remember how often they questioned your decisions. How they sometimes turned your good news into warnings. How they seemed uncomfortable whenever you became excited about something that did not involve them. Then another memory surfaces. Months earlier, you had shared a private dream with them. You had been nervous when you said it because you rarely spoke about it. They listened carefully. They promised to support you. But shortly afterward, someone else repeated a detail about that dream someone you had never told. You dismissed it then. Now you cannot. You sit on the edge of your bed, staring at the floor, asking yourself the question you have avoided: who else knows what I told them? And just when you think the answer is obvious, something happens that changes the entire meaning of the situation. The next morning, your phone lights up. It is a message from that same person. Can we talk? Nothing more. No explanation. No context. You stare at those 3 words for several seconds. Then another message appears. I think you need to know something before you make your decision. Your heartbeat quickens not because you know something terrible is coming, but because you suddenly realize they are talking about the opportunity you never told them you were still considering. How could they know? You do not respond immediately. Instead, you walk toward the window. Morning light is spreading across the floor, pale and quiet. Somewhere outside, a bicycle passes. A neighbor opens a gate. Life continues as though nothing has changed. But inside you, something has shifted. You begin to understand that sometimes the most revealing moment is not when someone betrays you openly. It is when they accidentally reveal how much attention they have been paying to the parts of your life you thought were private. You finally type, "What do you mean?" The reply comes almost instantly. "I heard something." You wait. Then. About you. Your fingers become still above the screen. There are many kinds of silence. There is the silence of peace, the silence of exhaustion, and the silence that arrives when your instincts are desperately trying to connect pieces your conscious mind has kept separate. This is the third kind. You ask, "Who told you?" There is a long pause. Then the typing indicator appears. Disappears. Appears again. Finally, the message arrives. "I can't tell you yet." You read it twice. Why would someone who supposedly wants to protect you refuse to tell you the truth? That is when the story takes a deeper turn. Because perhaps the person you have been worried about is not the only person involved. Perhaps they are only one piece of something larger. You remember another conversation from weeks earlier. Someone else had asked strangely specific questions about your plans. At the time, you thought they were simply curious. Now the memory feels different. The questions had seemed harmless, but they were carefully chosen. Where are you planning to go? Who are you working with? When are you making your decision? Have you told anyone yet? You had answered casually. Now you wish you hadn't. But before you can make sense of it, the phone rings. It is them. You almost let it go to voicemail. Then you answer. For several seconds, neither of you speaks. Finally, they say, "I didn't want you to hear this from somebody else." Your voice is quiet. Hear what? Another pause. "I thought I was helping you." Those words hit differently. Because suddenly you realize this may not be a simple story about someone who wishes you harm. Sometimes people interfere with our lives while convincing themselves they are doing the right thing. Sometimes insecurity disguises itself as concern. Sometimes jealousy wears the clothing of protection. And sometimes a person does not want to destroy your future, they simply cannot bear the thought of you becoming someone they can no longer control. You ask, "What did you do?" Their breathing changes. They do not answer. You ask again. "What did you do?" This time, their voice becomes barely audible. "I told them you weren't ready." The room seems to become completely still. You close your eyes. "Who?" Silence. Then they whisper a name. And when you hear it, your entire understanding of the past few months changes. Because that name belongs to the one person you never suspected. The person who had encouraged you. The person who had congratulated you. The person who had told you, again and again, that they wanted to see you succeed. You slowly sit down. Your mind races through every conversation, every coincidence, every delayed opportunity, every moment when something seemed to slip away for no clear reason. Suddenly, pieces begin fitting together. But there is still one missing piece. And this is where the story becomes more personal than you expected. Because the person on the phone begins crying. "I thought I was protecting you," they say. "But I was protecting myself." You do not speak. They continue. "I was afraid that if you moved forward, you wouldn't need me anymore." The confession lands heavier than anger ever could. Because now you understand the hidden danger was not necessarily hatred. It was attachment. A person had become so afraid of losing their place in your life that they quietly interfered with your path. And yet, before you can decide whether to forgive them, confront them, or walk away, they say something that changes everything again. There is one more thing you need to know. You wait. Their voice trembles. The decision you think you still have time to make. A pause. Someone already made it for you. Your heart drops. "What do you mean?" They take a breath. Then they say, "Because the person who has been standing between you and that opportunity has already contacted them again." The call ends. You stare at the darkened screen. For a moment, you cannot move. Then another notification appears. Not from them. From the very opportunity you thought was still waiting. There is only one sentence. "We need to talk about what we were told about you." And suddenly, you realize the real question is no longer whether someone has your best interests at heart. The question is, what exactly did they tell the world about you, and why were they so determined to make sure you never discovered it? You stare at the message until the words begin to blur. "We need to talk about what we were told about you." For several seconds, you consider deleting it. Not because you are afraid of the conversation, but because some part of you already knows that once you ask the next question, there will be no returning to the comfortable version of the story you had been living. You finally type, "What were you told?" The reply does not come. 1 minute passes. Then 5. Then 10. The silence becomes its own answer. You set the phone down and walk through the room, trying to slow your thoughts. The morning that had begun so ordinarily now feels strangely unfamiliar. The same walls surround you. The same sunlight rests across the floor. Yet something inside your understanding has shifted. You realize how easily a person can influence your life without ever touching you. A suggestion here. A warning there. A carefully chosen story told to the right person. A small doubt planted at exactly the right moment. And suddenly, an opportunity that once seemed possible begins looking unreasonable. You had thought your setbacks were random. Maybe they weren't. But before you can let that thought become anger, another message arrives. Please don't assume the worst. You read it slowly. Then another appears. You deserve to hear the whole story. You sit down. Then tell me. This time, the answer comes quickly. They said you were planning to leave everyone behind. Your stomach tightens. That wasn't true. You had never planned to abandon anyone. You had simply wanted to grow. To build something of your own. To step beyond the boundaries you had accepted for years because you were afraid of disappointing people. Then the next message arrives. They said you had changed. You almost laugh. Not because it is funny. Because suddenly the accusation makes sense. You had changed. You had become quieter about your plans. More selective about what you shared. More protective of your time. You had stopped explaining every decision to everyone around you. But changing your boundaries was never the same as changing your heart. And perhaps that was the misunderstanding, or perhaps someone deliberately turned your growth into evidence against you. You ask the question that has been waiting beneath everything else. Who believed them? The answer takes longer this time. Then your phone vibrates. One person who mattered. You stop breathing for a moment. Because you know exactly who they mean. The person connected to the opportunity. The person whose opinion could change everything. The person you had quietly hoped would recognize your potential without requiring you to prove yourself. You had assumed their distance meant rejection. Now you wonder whether they had ever been given the truth. That realization changes the emotional weight of everything. Maybe the door did not close because you were unworthy. Maybe someone had been standing outside that door, whispering a different version of your story. And suddenly, something your grandmother once told you returns to your mind, not as a prophecy, but as ordinary wisdom that you had forgotten. Never let someone else become the narrator of your life. You had smiled when she said it. Now you understand. You open an old drawer and find a small notebook filled with ideas you had written months ago. Some pages are messy. Some sentences are crossed out. There are plans that never happened and dreams you stopped discussing because people around you made them sound foolish. You turn page after page. Then you notice something. The dates. Every time you had seriously considered moving forward, something had happened afterward. A disagreement. A discouraging conversation. An unexpected delay. A sudden misunderstanding. You had always treated each event separately. Now they seem connected. But then your mind pushes back. Don't create a story out of coincidences. And that voice is important. Because discernment is not about turning suspicion into certainty. So you decide to do something different. You will ask for facts. Not assumptions. Not rumors. Not revenge. Facts. You call the person connected to the opportunity. They answer on the fourth ring. Neither of you speaks at first. Then they say, "I should have called you sooner." You look out the window. Why didn't you? A long breath. Because I didn't know who to believe. The words hurt, but they also confirm something. There had been another story. You ask, "What did you hear?" They hesitate. Then they tell you. Not everything. Just enough. Someone had claimed you were unreliable. That you were planning to walk away at the first sign of difficulty. That you were pursuing the opportunity for selfish reasons. That you had privately spoken badly about the people who trusted you. Your hands tighten around the phone. None of it was true. But the strangest part is what comes next. They say, the details were convincing. You close your eyes. Who told you? Silence. Then they answer. I don't know. You open your eyes. What do you mean you don't know? They didn't give me a name. Now you are confused. If they didn't give you a name, why did you believe them? Another pause. Because they knew things only someone close to you would know. That sentence changes the atmosphere completely. Someone had not simply invented a rumor. They had used fragments of truth. Your real fears. Your actual struggles. Private conversations. Small mistakes. Moments when you had been uncertain. They had taken pieces of your life and rearranged them into a picture that looked believable. That is more painful than an obvious lie. Because a complete lie is easy to reject. A distorted truth can walk straight through the door. You ask one final question. What exactly made you doubt me? The person on the other end becomes quiet. Then they say, there was one thing. What? They told me you had already chosen someone else. Your heart stops. What? They said you were only using this opportunity until something better came along. You shake your head. That makes no sense. I know that now. Then why didn't you ask me? Their voice softens. Because I was afraid of what you'd say. That answer hurts in a completely different way. You realize the damage was never only caused by the person spreading the story. It was also caused by the silence of people who believed the story without giving you the dignity of a conversation. For a moment, anger rises inside you. Then it fades. Not because what happened was acceptable, but because you suddenly see something deeper. You have spent too much of your life trying to convince people who had already decided what they wanted to believe. And perhaps this was the lesson hidden underneath everything. You cannot control the story someone tells about you. But you can control whether you abandon yourself trying to correct every version of it. The person on the phone says, there is something else. You almost laugh from exhaustion. Of course there is. They hesitate. This may be difficult to hear. Tell me. The person who contacted me didn't just talk about your past. Your expression changes. What did they talk about? Your future. You become completely still. They explained that the person had described an upcoming decision you had not publicly announced. A private plan. A conversation that was supposed to happen within days. You whisper, "That's impossible." I thought so too. Who knew? I asked myself the same question. And? They said you had told them. You shake your head. I didn't. The line goes silent. Then you remember something. A single evening. A quiet conversation. A place you had almost forgotten. You had mentioned the plan to one person not because you trusted them deeply, but because they had been there during a difficult chapter of your life. You had assumed they were safe. Now that memory returns with painful clarity. You remember their reaction. Not excitement. Not surprise. Something else. A brief flicker across their face. Almost disappointment. At the time, you ignored it. Now you cannot. You thank the person on the phone and end the call. You don't confront anyone. Not yet. Instead, you sit quietly and ask yourself what you actually want. Not what would make the other person regret their actions. Not what would prove them wrong. What do you want? The answer comes more clearly than you expect. Peace. Not the kind of peace that comes from everyone apologizing. The kind that comes from no longer needing permission to become who you were meant to become. That realization gives you enough strength to stand. You walk outside. The air is cool. The street is busy now, completely different from the silent morning you woke up to. People are carrying groceries. Children are laughing somewhere nearby. A bus pulls away from the curb. Nothing around you knows that your understanding of several relationships has just changed. And strangely, that comforts you. The world does not stop because someone misunderstood you. Your life does not end because someone tried to redirect it. You keep walking. Then your phone vibrates. This time, it is the person you have been thinking about. The one whose actions started this entire chain of questions. Their message contains only 4 words. I know you found out. You stop walking. Another message appears. I can explain. Then a third. But you need to meet me alone. You stare at the screen. Every instinct tells you to demand answers immediately. But something inside you says, wait. So you don't respond. Instead, you continue walking until you reach a quiet place overlooking the city. Below you, traffic moves like streams of light. You think about every person who has entered your life carrying a different kind of influence. Some encouraged you. Some challenged you. Some loved you imperfectly. Some needed you to remain the version of yourself they understood. And perhaps one of the hardest truths about growing is discovering that not everyone who says they love you is prepared to watch you outgrow the role they assigned to you. But there is still something you don't understand. Why would this person go so far? What were they protecting? What were they afraid of losing? You return to the message. I can explain. You finally type one sentence. Then tell me the truth. The typing indicator appears. It disappears. Then appears again. For nearly a minute, nothing arrives. Finally, the screen lights up. I didn't start this. You read it again. I didn't start this. Your pulse rises. A second message appears. I was asked to do it. You stare at the words. Asked? By whom? Before you can type the question, another message arrives. They knew you would trust me. Your throat tightens. Then comes the sentence that turns everything you thought you understood upside down. And they chose me because I was the only person close enough to you to make you doubt yourself. You lower the phone. The city continues moving below. But suddenly, the story is no longer about one person interfering with your future. Someone else had designed the entire situation. Someone who understood your relationships. Someone who knew who you trusted. Someone who knew exactly which words would make you hesitate. And then, just as you begin to wonder who could possibly know you that well, your phone vibrates one final time. The message contains a name. You read it once. Then twice. Your hands begin to tremble. Because it isn't the name of a stranger. It isn't the name of an enemy. It is the name of someone you had defended when everyone else questioned their intentions. And beneath that name is one final sentence. They told me to keep you away from the truth until it was too late. You stare at the screen, realizing that the person you thought needed protecting may never have been you. Perhaps the real target was the future you were quietly building. And now that you know someone has been working behind the scenes, there is only one question left. What happens when the person who planned everything realizes you are no longer willing to play the part they wrote for you? My beloved child. You read the name again, hoping that somehow your eyes have misunderstood it. They haven't. The person you had defended is the person behind the curtain. For a moment, anger arrives before anything else. It rises quickly, almost like heat beneath your skin. You remember every time you stood up for them. Every time someone questioned their motives and you answered, "They would never do that to me." Every private conversation. Every confidence. Every moment when you chose loyalty even when loyalty cost you something. And now you understand why the betrayal feels so much heavier than a simple lie. They didn't merely misunderstand you. They knew you. That is why they knew where to place the doubt. You stand beneath the evening sky, phone still in your hand, while the noise of the city continues around you. People walk past without knowing that an entire chapter of your life has just been rewritten. Then something unexpected happens. You stop shaking. Not because the truth doesn't hurt. Because the truth has finally given you something the confusion never could, a direction. You call the person who had confessed everything. They answer almost immediately. Did you see the name? Yes. Silence. Then you ask, why? Their voice breaks. I was afraid. Of them? No. A pause. Of losing you. You close your eyes. There it is. The truth beneath the truth. They had not participated because they hated you. They had participated because they were terrified of becoming unnecessary in your life. Someone else had recognized that fear and used it. They promised me you wouldn't know, they whisper. They said if I helped them slow you down, everything would eventually return to normal. You ask, and did it? No. Their voice becomes quieter. Nothing returned to normal. I just became someone I didn't recognize. Those words stay with you. Because suddenly, you understand that there were two kinds of brokenness in this story. One person had manipulated. Another had cooperated. But neither could determine what happened next. You ask where they are. They tell you. You drive there. The journey feels longer than it should. Streetlights pass across the windshield in steady intervals. Your thoughts move between anger and sadness, between memories and unanswered questions. But somewhere along the way, you realize something important. You are not going there to destroy anyone. You are going there to reclaim the truth. When you arrive, the person is waiting. They look different. Not physically. Emotionally. The confidence is gone. The carefully constructed explanation has disappeared. They look like someone who has finally run out of places to hide. You sit across from them. For several seconds, neither of you speaks. Then you ask the only question that matters. Why did you do it? They look down. I thought I knew what was best for you. You almost smile, but there is no joy in it. No. You thought you knew what was best for yourself. They begin to cry. And this time, you don't rush to comfort them. Not because you have stopped caring. Because compassion does not require you to erase what happened. They finally tell you everything. The opportunity you thought had disappeared had never been taken away. The person connected to it had been uncertain because of false information. The rumors had been exaggerated from small truths. Your private plans had been discovered through conversations that were repeated carelessly. The delays had been engineered through fear. And the person who had organized it all had one central motive. They believed that if you became successful, independent, and confident, you would no longer need the people who had always depended on your hesitation. It was never about protecting you. It was about preserving a version of you that made other people comfortable. That realization hurts. But it also frees you. Because suddenly, every time you questioned your worth begins to look different. Maybe you were not failing. Maybe you were being discouraged. Maybe you were not incapable. Maybe you were surrounded by voices that benefited from your self-doubt. And perhaps the most dangerous voice had eventually become your own. You look at the person across from you. Do you understand what you took from me? They nod through tears. Time. You pause. Not my future. You couldn't take that. But you took time I could have spent believing in myself. They whisper, I'm sorry. You believe that they are. But forgiveness is not the same as pretending. So you tell them something they never expected. I forgive you. Their eyes lift. But I cannot give you the same access to my life. The room becomes completely silent. That is the boundary they never thought you would create. Not revenge. Not cruelty. Distance. You leave. And for the first time in a long while, the silence around you feels clean. You return home and place your phone on the table. Then you see the message from the opportunity. We would still like to meet. You stare at it. A month ago, that sentence would have made you celebrate. Tonight, it makes you breathe deeply. Because now you understand something much more valuable than getting the opportunity. You understand that your worth was never determined by whether someone opened a door. You were worthy before the invitation. You were worthy during the delay. You were worthy when people misunderstood you. And you are worthy now. You reply, I'd like to meet. The next morning, you walk into the meeting without trying to perform. You don't exaggerate your abilities. You don't apologize for your ambition. You don't spend the entire conversation explaining what other people said about you. You simply tell the truth. What you learned. What you can offer. What you are willing to build. And when the meeting ends, the person across the table says something you will remember for years. I almost lost the opportunity to know who you really were. You smile softly. So did I. The decision comes later. You are offered the opportunity. But by then, the victory feels different. It isn't about proving the people who doubted you wrong. It is about discovering that you can walk into a room where your name has been misunderstood and still leave with your dignity intact. Weeks pass. The person who betrayed you sends messages. Some ask for forgiveness. Some ask for another chance. You respond when you are ready. You forgive gradually. You release anger carefully. But you stop confusing forgiveness with access. That distinction changes your life. You become more observant. Not suspicious. You learn that healthy love does not demand that you shrink. Healthy friendship does not punish you for growing. Healthy support does not require you to remain dependent. And real care does not secretly compete with your future. One evening, months later, you find yourself standing in the same place where you once read that devastating message. The city below is glowing. The air is cool. But you are different now. You think about the person you were before everything happened. The person who explained too much. Trusted too quickly. Apologized for having dreams. Mistook discomfort for loyalty. You wish you could go back and tell that version of yourself one thing. You don't have to become smaller to keep someone close. And perhaps that is the deepest lesson hidden inside this fictional journey. Sometimes the warning is not telling you to run from a person. Sometimes it is inviting you to stop abandoning yourself for them. Sometimes the answer is not confrontation. It is clarity. Sometimes the door you think someone closed was never theirs to control. And sometimes what looks like a painful interruption becomes the moment you finally learn to recognize your own voice. You look toward the horizon. The sky is beginning to change. Darkness gives way to the first traces of morning. You remember all those nights when you wondered why everything felt delayed. Now you know. The delay did not mean your life was denied. It meant you were being given time to discover what mattered before the next chapter began. And although this story is fictional, its message can still carry something real into your heart. Pay attention to how people make you feel after you share your dreams. Notice whether someone celebrates your growth or constantly makes you question it. Listen when something feels inconsistent, but don't let fear become your compass. Ask questions. Seek facts. Give people room to explain themselves. And most importantly, never surrender your ability to think clearly simply because someone claims to know what is best for you. Because your future deserves honesty. Your heart deserves peace. And your life deserves relationships where love does not come with invisible chains. You take one final breath. Then you smile. Not because everyone who hurt you has apologized. Not because every unanswered question received the ending you wanted. But because you finally understand that closure does not always come from another person's confession. Sometimes closure comes when you stop waiting for someone else to give you permission to move forward. You walk away from the railing. You head home. And this time, you are not walking toward the life someone else designed for you. You are walking toward the life you were brave enough to choose for yourself. So if you have ever felt that something in a relationship was quietly asking you to become less of yourself, pause and reflect. Don't immediately accuse. Don't immediately run. But don't ignore yourself either. Let truth have time to reveal itself. Let actions speak louder than promises. Let wisdom become stronger than fear. And remember this, someone else's inability to celebrate your growth does not make your growth wrong. Your kindness is not weakness. Your boundaries are not cruelty. Your dreams are not selfish. And your future does not require everyone to understand it before you begin. Tonight, may you be given the courage to recognize what is healthy, the wisdom to question what is confusing, and the strength to release what continually diminishes your spirit. May you find relationships where you can speak honestly without fear. May you find people who celebrate your progress without secretly competing with it. May the mistakes of your past become wisdom rather than chains. May every disappointment teach you something valuable without hardening your heart. And may you never again mistake someone's need to control your path for genuine love. May peace enter the places where suspicion once lived. May clarity replace confusion. May courage replace hesitation. And may the next chapter of your life be shaped not by the voices that doubted you, but by the truth you finally learned to trust within yourself. If this story touched something deep inside you, stay connected to this channel for more fictional inspirational stories about faith, courage, relationships, healing, and discovering your own strength. And before you leave, take one quiet moment for yourself. Breathe. Let go of the need to solve everything tonight. You don't have to know every answer to take the next honest step. Sometimes that is where a new life begins. And if you believe better days are still ahead, leave a simple, "I choose peace," in the comments. Subscribe if you want more stories like this, and share this message with someone who may need the reminder that they never have to become smaller just to remain loved. May your heart be protected by wisdom, your path be guided by truth, and your future be filled with people who genuinely want to see you become everything you were capable of becoming. And may you walk forward with peace, not because the world finally became perfect, but because you finally stopped giving imperfect people the power to define your worth. Your story is not over. Perhaps the most beautiful chapter is only beginning.